Welcome to my WOW Chats, words of wisdom with people I love and admire and respect. And Antonio Sausys, now did I say your last name right?
You did very well.
Sausys. So Antonio, let's see. I think I first met you at Misty, the Montreal International Symposium on Therapeutic Yoga. That was about 3 years ago. And you're just super wise, you're charming, you're very approachable, and you're very open. And we're here at the Symposium on Yoga Therapy and Research. I attended your fabulous session yesterday.
Thank you.
Yoga, I forget the exact title, but it was yoga for like grief and grief relief and loss. And I remember even when we met in Montreal, there was one thing that you told me I thought was really fascinating. This was the first time I had heard this. I don't think I've ever shared this with you, actually. And you told me, this was before I read any of your work or really followed you, and you said that we all grieve. We all have we're all going through some sort of grieving process. And that was the first time that I actually realized that grief isn't just about loss of a person and death, because I always think of grieving as that. So do you have any words of wisdom for people that are listening? Just what does that elaborate on that? Like what is grief? What does that mean? And then maybe some words of wisdom, like one little piece of advice or words of wisdom for someone to use with that.
Sure. Well, perhaps the best is to bring the definition of grief, which is the normal reaction to the loss of things or people we are attached to. And the reason why I bring up the definition itself is because it's quite simple. We can all relate to it. And yet it surprised me when I first heard it, because I read things or people we are attached to. And this is an indication that we are used to think that we can only grieve when someone has died. And the truth is that we can grieve the loss of the things we are attached to. Whether we are attached to our house where we grew up and it was our family house and one day burns to a fire, or we are attached to a beautiful piece of clothes that someone dear to us gave us and we left in that train or in that plane or whatever, or we are attached to a TV show, and every Sunday we watch The Simpsons. And one day when The Simpsons are gone, imagine after 20-something years or whatever, a lot of people are going to be grieving, because we can be attached to anything. And because grief is the normal reaction to the loss of things or people we are attached to, I think that that's important, to acknowledge that when we are grieving the loss of things, the comparative mind comes in and says, oh, come on, there's people that are grieving horrible deaths. Why are you grieving that ring that you lost, or that relationship that you lost, or your innocence, or the idea of who you would have been if you wouldn't have had an abusive stepfather, just to give you an example. So all those things cause loss, cause grief. All those losses, and I think that it's important to acknowledge it, because it gives people a right to grieve, a sense of permission to be able to grieve. And that's the one very direct consequence of being aware of this fact that I have witnessed in people, that then they go, oh, then I'm okay grieving for that.
Yeah, and I really liked what you said yesterday in your session, that it's normal. It's not a dysfunction or anything. You don't have to go to the doctor, and and there are certain cases, obviously, if it's
that's the other part of the definition that calls one's attention, that it's a normal reaction. And in fact, one of the big helps that people can get from grief counseling or from someone in yoga therapy who understands about grieving is normalization. Is to understand that even though grief feels like an illness and it has so many symptoms, and the symptoms are emotional and physical and mental and behavioral and social and spiritual, and it's a huge list of symptoms, and perhaps we know of very little conditions that have so many symptoms, and yet It's normal.
Right.
And so it's great because again it gives a person, a griever, an awareness in regards to that they're doing the right thing. They're just it feels horrible and no healing is necessary.
No healing is necessary.
Correct. So
That-
healing
yeah.
from grief is not the right way.
I
to do it.
remember that. Healing from
From
healing
grief is
from grief.
not appropriate because we're not sick. Now, it is a very tough process, and we can use help. Help, or as we say, I'm from Uruguay, from South America, and one of those things that you always say in your country that you don't know how good or wise they are until you leave your country and you learn how another culture presents it. And so condolences, keep offering condolences. And here we say, I'm sorry for your loss.
Yes, I'm sorry for your loss.
Correct. And a lot of people get upset because, are you really sorry? Or do you know if I'm sorry? Because I'm angry maybe about my loss. I'm not sorry. So what are you saying? So and we want to say something. In Uruguay, we say, te acompaño el sentimiento. I accompany you in your feeling. And I so many times I said it like a parrot, someone died, someone, oh, te acompaño el sentimiento. And now I see how valuable that is, because in grief, what we need is company. We don't need someone to tell us how to do it. We don't need someone to tell us what to do. We need people to hear us, and we need to just have company, because it's a very tough thing.
It's great.
Yeah, and I think that the third,
yeah.
if you want, the third aspect of
Yes.
the definition that I think is important and that relates to yoga big time is that we grieve the loss of things or people we are attached to. There's a famous phrase popularized by Queen Elizabeth that says, grief is the price we pay for love. And when I say this phrase, everyone goes, oh,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
so
Yeah.
beautiful, and they write it down. and it's inaccurate.
Yeah.
It's untrue. Because if you hear the definition again, love is nowhere to be found. Because we don't grieve the loss of things we love. In fact, the big journey of grieving is going from loving in presence to loving in absence. Where loving remains.
This is where I get goosebumps.
Where loving remains. We don't want to get rid of the love. We want to stay loving, and we want to understand how love continues after death or after loss. So the true seed for grief is attachment, is the belief that my happiness or my well-being depends on the presence of a person or on the continuous availability of an object, of a thing. And because, as yoga teaches us, everything is impermanent, this is why Patanjali named attachment one of the sure tickets to suffering. Because if your happiness and well-being depends on something that is impermanent, your suffering and well-being is going to go when that impermanent thing goes. And that thing will go.
Yeah.
Inevitably.
Yeah, and we as humans, we're human, and so we have attachments, and
Absolutely.
we can work on that philosophy, and there's different things we can do, but we're at the end of the day, we're human, and so the last, to wrap it up, to the audience here, what would with all of that said, someone listening to this and they enjoy it and they're like, oh, that's great, and what would you say, what should that person listening do with this information? Just, you know what I mean? Like practically,
yes.
like, so what do you do with this?
I would say, self-normalize yourself. So know that what you're going through is normal, even though it sounds terrible. Know that it's normal, and it feels bad. Know that it's normal. Number 2, give yourself permission to grieve not just the death of your beloveds or just death. Give yourself permission to understand that grief is very prevailing and that we can grieve all things we are attached to. And perhaps also review your idea of attachment. I would not say, like in the yoga orthodox textbooks, unattached. Because if you are grieving, it's because you were attached already. So we cannot move the cursor back and say, now do it again and don't attach. We can't do that. Now you have to deal with that attachment. Yet, I suggest detached attachment. I suggest attach. Be human. We are neurologically hardwired for attachment. Yet keep the fierce awareness that what you are attached to will inevitably disappear.
Words of wisdom, Antonio Sausys.
Thank
That
you.
was beautiful. Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you, dear.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching this WOW Chat with Antonio Sausys. For more wisdom from Antonio, please visit yogaforgriefrelief.com and check out some of my other WOW Chats below.